Let's start here. I used to think my path was forged by pure chance, by luck, by external forces entirely out of my control. But as my practice deepened, a hard truth emerged. A clear pattern I couldn't ignore. My days just kept looping. My choices repeated endlessly. Without even realizing it, I was just repeating myself. And if that holds true, the future isn't some grand mystery waiting to be revealed. It's simply the momentum of what I am practicing right now. Marcus Aurelius told himself clearly, a person becomes whatever they focus their attention on. I realized it wasn't merely my philosophy shaping me. It was my daily routines, my knee-jerk reactions, those quiet choices made when nobody was looking. That insight stings. It leaves zero room for blame and absolutely nowhere to hide, leaving just one heavy question. Am I actually willing to accept the person I'm actively becoming? Eventually, I had to face a truth I'd dodged for years. I wasn't trapped by my environment. I was trapped because I kept inventing clever ways to justify it. I had an alibi for everything. Why I hadn't reached my goals, why certain plans failed, why everyone else seemed to have an easier path. Every time I spun those narratives, I felt a fleeting sense of relief, like I had successfully shielded my ego from genuine accountability. In reality, I was just blocking my own growth. If I could rationalize my struggle, I never actually had to fix it. That's a toxic place to dwell. It mimics self-awareness, but it's really just pure stagnation. Aurelius wrote in his journal not to whine about the world, but to brace for it. He expected to face difficult people, unjust scenarios, and sudden roadblocks. He didn't do this to play the victim, but to maintain total command over his own response. That exact principle changed everything for me. I finally understood the issue wasn't what the world threw at me. The issue was how long I let it dictate my worth. I kept waiting for perfect clarity to act, waiting to feel brave before stepping up, waiting for a burst of motivation to do the heavy lifting. And in all that waiting, I surrendered complete ownership over my existence. Because here's the Stoic reality. No one is coming to save you from your bad habits. Nobody will forge your discipline. No one will drag you into becoming the person you claim you want to be. That hard truth feels crushing at first, but it is also the spark of something incredibly profound. Listen, if no one is coming, you and I have nothing left to wait for. There's only your next chosen action. That is the moment personal responsibility stops feeling like dead weight and transforms into absolute power. I had to accept that even if my past trauma wasn't my fault, fixing it was entirely my responsibility. The learned behaviors, the lingering fears, the worn-out excuses. Not a single one would break unless I broke them myself. And that choice isn't loud or cinematic. It rarely feels like an earth-shattering breakthrough. It feels incredibly quiet, deeply uncomfortable, like standing completely alone, stripped of scapegoats, finally grasping that from today onward, every outcome depends directly on your actions, your personal standards, and your raw grit. The emperor never had the luxury of blaming his duties or tough conditions. He carried the massive burden of Rome. Yet he actively grounded himself in one fact. His own mind was his sole true possession. It's the exact truth most of us dodge. We don't control the chaos, but we fully control our response to it. Most people don't actually fail from a lack of talent. They fail because they constantly negotiate with their own standards. They put off the crucial work. They compromise their baseline values. Over time, that habit becomes their character. I recognized that flaw in my own mirror. Every tiny justification sculpted the man I was becoming. Every single time I dodged hardship, I actively reinforced a fragile version of myself. That weak version doesn't just fade away. It takes root. It gets deeply familiar. It feels safe. Until you wake up and see that very comfort cost you your ideal life. Eventually, you must make a firm choice, not a theatrical one. Nothing you broadcast online, just a silent, ironclad vow that you're finished making excuses and ready to take the helm. That you'll stop judging yourself by noble intentions and demand concrete actions. You stop asking who is at fault and start pointing the finger inward. Because real responsibility isn't about assigning blame. It is pure, unfiltered ownership. It's realizing that your daily routines, your mental framework, your discipline, and your destiny are inseparable. Like it or not, you are already building those pillars every single day. The only valid question is if you're doing it with intention or on autopilot. And we're going to face this fact together. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Every passing minute is a test to either validate your old self or step up into the practitioner you must become. That is the exact moment philosophical maturity begins. Not when the road gets smoother, but when you stop hoping for ease and forge yourself into someone who handles the friction. I used to genuinely believe blind effort was enough. I thought as long as I hustled and kept grinding, I'd magically land somewhere important. But the reality set in like a quiet storm. I was burning energy without a compass. That kind of scattered effort won't build a legacy. It just eats the clock. I could list off everything I feared. I didn't want to fail. I refused to suffer. I hated feeling left behind. But when I probed my own mind for what I actively desired, I found hesitation, pure static, and often an embarrassing empty void. That is where the masses stay trapped. Endless motion lacking true vision. It feels way safer to remain vague than to commit to a hard path and risk failing. But a life without aim carries a heavy tax. It slowly bleeds the purpose out of your habits. It warps discipline into drudgery, making real progress impossible to spot. The Stoic emperor refused to accept that kind of mental drift. Surrounded by political chaos, he continually anchored himself to a singular, rugged principle. Define the exact character you want to build, then ruthlessly align your actions with that standard. Not just on good days, but daily. That is the birthplace of clarity. Not by drafting some flawless master plan, but by locking onto a true north strong enough to dictate your daily choices. I finally grasped that my core flaw wasn't a lack of drive, it was a lack of definition. Because without a clear vision of your own character, everything becomes negotiable. You and I have both been here. Every action feels optional, splitting your identity. Half of you demands discipline and growth. The other half begs for comfort and endless distraction. That internal war creates a constant, grinding friction. It makes basic daily habits feel impossibly heavy. You are never just picking a task. You are actively choosing which version of your character takes the wheel in that exact moment. Without a clear philosophy, the weaker side wins. It dodges the pain, delays the work, and invents clever excuses afterward. But when you clearly define the person you strive to become, the mental landscape shifts completely. You stop asking what you feel like doing today. Instead, you ask what that stronger version would do. That single question simplifies everything. It kills the overthinking. It destroys doubt entirely. It forces your actions onto a steady path that ignores your fleeting moods completely. In my own practice, I mapped out my future self. No vague concepts, just hard, specific daily behaviors. How I think when the plan falls apart. How I talk to myself under severe stress. How I spend my hours alone. and how I face raw discomfort without blinking. The sharper that image became, the harder it was to ignore the massive gap between my current state and my potential. But a Stoic never fears that gap. We use it as fuel. It acts as a compass, a silent standard tracking your every move. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that a man's soul is deeply dyed by the color of his thoughts. In that exact same way, your core identity is forged by the actions you repeat. So if you struggle with consistency, you do not lack basic discipline. You are simply trying to serve far too many conflicting identities at once. You want to be focused, yet easily distracted. Completely committed, yet perfectly comfortable. Relentless, yet passive. That is never balance. That is pure confusion. Real clarity demands a hard choice. And choosing means killing off the past versions of yourself that hold you back, even if they feel warm and easy. Every single time you select a mindset, you carve it deeper. You make it solid and dominant. Fast forward a few years, and that is exactly who you are. Not through grand intentions, but brutal repetition. Once that truth clicked for me, I quit chasing cheap motivation. I stopped waiting to feel ready, and I locked my focus onto strict alignment. Because when your daily efforts match your true direction, real progress becomes inevitable. Slow, maybe, but undeniable. Consistency builds the bedrock you can actually trust. Mental clarity will never erase the pain of hard work. It just kills the hesitation. It gives deep meaning to your daily struggle. That alone is enough to keep you marching forward. You are no longer just blindly reacting to events. You are actively forging it, decision by single decision, into a life that proves who you want to be. I used to finish my days completely drained, staring at the ceiling, totally unable to name one meaningful thing I actually got done. That wrecked my head for a while. I honestly thought being tired meant I was working hard, grinding away, pushing myself to the absolute limit. But as my philosophical practice deepened, an ugly truth surfaced. Hard work was not draining me. Endless hesitation was. The constant overthinking, agonizing over choices, and fighting myself when I needed sharp action, not endless internal debate. I would sit totally frozen. Do I start right now or hold off? Is this the absolute best move? What if I am completely wrong about this? What if I fail in front of everyone? What if a smarter shortcut exists? Those thoughts did not just quietly pass by. They anchored themselves in my brain and looped endlessly. They bled me dry. By the time I forced a choice, if I even made one, my mental battery was totally dead. I had zero fire left to actually execute the task with any real power or stoic conviction. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius never had the luxury to entertain that kind of mental weakness. Ruling an empire demanded immediate action. More importantly, his stoic practice demanded absolute rule over his own mind. He knew the true obstacle is never the event itself. It is the weak judgment we attach to it. I started to realize my brutal exhaustion had absolutely nothing to do with my daily workload. It came directly from those paranoid judgments. The chronic fear of failing, predicting disasters, worrying about other people. I was taking basic, boring tasks and turning them into massive, agonizing mountains. I made life painfully heavy, trapped in the delusion that overthinking would magically protect me from making stupid mistakes. In reality, it only protected me from taking action. And without forward motion, your life rots. I finally caught myself negotiating with my own mind every single day. Tiny, cowardly deals that looked harmless but poisoned my potential over time. I will do it later. I will wait for inspiration. I will strike when the stars align perfectly. Every single time I backed down, I felt a quick rush of relief. But cheap comfort always demands a harsh tax. It killed my momentum and rewarded my worst habits. I was quietly building an ironclad habit of cowardice. Marcus Aurelius warned himself every day, you could leave life right this exact second. Let death dictate what you do, say, and think. Internalizing that truth violently shattered my delusion. I do not have 50 years to sit around waiting for the perfect moment. The cold reality is that pausing does not make your decisions smarter. It just makes them late. And late is the graveyard where opportunities go to die. I realized most daily choices never require absolute perfection. They demand raw commitment. They demand the guts to step forward using only the rough data you hold in your hands. Stop waiting for a magical feeling of certainty that simply does not exist. Certainty is never found sitting on the couch. It is a fire built solely through taking action. The longer I waited, the weaker my confidence grew. It was a toxic, self-feeding loop. As a practitioner, I finally saw that every choice carries a heavy, invisible mental price tag. It costs pure mental energy. Every single time you weigh an option, your brain spins up simulations. It attempts to predict the future and invent tragic consequences. It tries desperately to control the unknown. That massive mental effort burns fuel even if you do nothing. Let's think about this together. Multiply that process by 50 small choices a day, and the exhaustion makes total sense. You are not physically working too hard. You are just agonizing over meaningless options. The Stoic fix was never to dodge decisions completely. I had to crush the pointless choices. I built a rigid framework where core habits needed zero debate. My Stoic identity would command my actions, not my fragile emotions. I started asking a much better question. I stopped asking what I felt like doing. Instead, I asked, what would the person I want to be do right now? That question changed everything. It stripped away the noise. It killed my hesitation. I could finally act without spinning my wheels because the choice was already settled on a higher plane. I stopped bargaining with myself in the moment. I simply followed a standard I had already set. This shift did not wipe out the difficulty. It destroyed the friction. I poured my energy into action instead of endless debate. And over time, I noticed a profound shift. I finished my days less mentally drained, even after doing a lot more, because my energy was no longer bleeding out through internal battles. It fueled real progress instead. That is when a powerful philosophical truth hit me. Clarity cuts the thinking. Identity removes decisions, and action restores energy. Let's think about this together. If you live in hesitation, you will stay exhausted with nothing to show for it. But when you act with intention, you reclaim your drive and your direction. For years, as a student of philosophy, I thought true change demanded a massive, sudden leap. A surge of willpower, a breakthrough moment where I would instantly transform overnight. But that magical moment never actually arrived. Even when motivation spiked, it burned out fast, leaving me right back at square one. That is when I finally saw the fundamental truth I had been completely blind to. The people who genuinely transformed their reality never relied on random bursts of intensity. They built rigid structure. They repeated tiny steps in sequence until starting took zero effort. The actions just flowed. As a thinker, I dismissed this at first as way too basic. But the deeper I practiced this, the more its absolute power revealed itself. Because a strong life is never built in random, isolated moments. It gets forged in sequences. It is what you do directly after what you just finished. Once that chain becomes automatic, it literally drags you forward without friction. Marcus Aurelius never sat around waiting to feel inspired. He commanded himself to get out of bed and do the necessary work of a human being. Not because it felt comfortable, but because duty demanded it. I realized my entire daily approach was flawed. I used to wake up and ask my brain what it wanted to do. That single question sparked instant hesitation. My mind would immediately invent a clever excuse to dodge the pain. But killing that question and building a sequence made life stoic and simple. I wake up, make the bed, drink water, train my body, sit in absolute silence. I journal. I tackle the hardest project, zero negotiation, nothing. One disciplined step driving the next. At first, it felt incredibly stiff and mechanical. But eventually, it became pure freedom. I stopped needing motivation to get off the couch. I relied on heavy momentum. And momentum comes from steady continuity, not wild intensity. Knock out the first task, and the second gets easier. Crush the second, and the third just falls right into place naturally. Before you even think about it, you are locked into motion. And forward momentum is exactly what most people fail to build. Not because they lack the skill, but because they try to start from dead zero every morning. They view each habit as a brand new mountain. You and I both know that requires fresh energy every time, which is draining because starting is brutal. But link your habits together. Make one trigger the next, and you crush that initial block. You stop trying to convince yourself to move. You are already in the trenches. The shift is subtle, but it rewires everything. I started treating my daily routine not as random chores, but as an unbreakable iron chain. My single duty was to keep the chain intact. Forget perfection. Forget operating at max capacity all the time. My job was just to forge the next link, day after day. That framework made Stoic discipline totally manageable. I stopped trying to dominate the entire 24 hours. I simply took command of the very next step. Marcus Aurelius constantly anchored himself in the present, demanding he execute the task at hand with brutal honesty. This philosophy requires that exact same focus. You do not have to figure out your whole life today. Just strike the next target with heavy intention and trust the chain to pull you forward. My practice taught me consistency is never forced. It is engineered. You make the right choices obvious. You make the entry points easy. Most critically, you anchor them to something already cemented in your day. Launching from a dead stop is agonizing, but flowing into the next thing is natural. Execute that sequence for long enough, and it builds your true character. Not with fireworks, but with a quiet, undeniable sort of power. You evolve into the person who shows up, the one who actually honors their own word. That solid identity is never born from good intentions. It is forged in the fire of repetition. Once set, it feeds itself because your daily actions finally align with the philosopher you see in the mirror. That alignment kills the friction entirely. It burns away the doubt, bringing a grounded stability most modern people desperately lack. This is how you construct a meaningful life. Never through random bursts of effort, but through relentless daily structure. Through tiny, unbreakable chains forged until they become your actual nature. The secret is not making the chain look impressive. It is keeping it unbroken. A basic sequence, executed daily, will easily slaughter a genius master plan that you quit by Friday. Grasp that, and you stop hunting for massive overnight fixes. You fiercely protect the tiny wins, because those daily repetitions are not just simple habits. They are the absolute bedrock of the person you are becoming. I remember a dark phase in my own life where literally nothing felt like enough. Regardless of what I achieved or bought, a hollow echo told me I was missing something crucial. Like the equation was completely off. I kept lying to myself. I thought that hitting a certain goal, solving specific problems, or grabbing more status would finally bring me stoic peace. But true peace never showed up. The flaw was not in the external world. The issue was deep in my own perception. Without even noticing, I had conditioned my brain to obsess over the gap, focusing strictly on what was missing, unpolished, or yet to happen. Let me leave you with this. That blindness kept me from seeing what I already had. Everything that was working. Everything I once begged for. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself he could leave life at any moment. So act like it. That thought isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to bring clarity. When you and I finally accept that nothing in life is guaranteed, our whole perspective shifts entirely. You start paying attention to the ordinary moments you used to walk right past, that quiet stability you always took for granted. Just the simple fact you are breathing, thinking, and making choices, a privilege so many no longer have. But human nature doesn't naturally let our minds rest there. It wanders. It actively hunts for problems. It scans the horizon for threats, compares, and judges. It seeks out what is broken because years of conditioning trained it to. If you don't step in, that negative loop becomes your default setting. It turns into the lens framing your entire life. Once that happens, even your wins feel empty. Why? Because you are constantly weighing them against whatever you think is missing. I broke that cycle in my own practice, not through forced gratitude, but by asking better questions. What am I missing here? What simple truths have I stopped seeing? At first, the answers hid in the shadows. My focus had been trained to look everywhere else. Then they slowly surfaced. Small details, simple realities, the kind of subtle truths that stay completely invisible unless you are actively hunting for them. Paying closer attention triggered a shift. My outside world stayed exactly the same, but my experience of it transformed. I stopped walking through my days feeling constantly shortchanged. I caught moments of genuine sufficiency, split seconds where absolutely nothing needed fixing. That didn't make me soft or kill my drive for self-improvement. It just anchored my ambition. It handed me a solid foundation. I could keep pushing forward. But I dropped that exhausting pressure of always feeling a step behind. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. I quickly learned this wasn't just dusty philosophy. It is pure practical reality. What you fixate on dictates your emotions. Those emotions drive your behavior, and eventually, that behavior builds your life. Stare only at what is missing, and you operate purely from scarcity. You rush, you compare, you never actually feel at peace. But when you actively train your mind to see what is already here, you build a totally different internal foundation. A state that is calm, intentional, and sharply aware. From that solid ground, your actions turn deliberate. They align with reality, rather than being dragged around by endless, empty dissatisfaction. I also caught myself ignoring my own inner progress. I was so obsessed with the final goal line that I completely dismissed the miles I had already walked to get there. That habit bred a toxic sense of inadequacy, like no amount of work would ever be enough. But taking a hard look at the truth changed things. Acknowledging my own sweat, the mental shifts, and the strict discipline I built sparked a totally different kind of fire. A drive fueled by respect, not panic. Respect for the brutal process and respect for the person I was molding. That realization flipped my approach to personal growth entirely. I stopped sprinting toward tomorrow just to escape today. I started building my future on a present I could finally see clearly. That harsh clarity changed the whole game. It wasn't easier, but it was honest. It was real. I stopped running blind and finally started keeping my eyes wide open. Through that focus, I found what you and I usually miss. Not more, but enough. And trust me, that realization doesn't kill your hunger to grow. It sharpens it. It strips away the desperate need to prove your worth, trading it for a quiet, unshakable march toward real progress. Built on sharp awareness, not avoidance. And once you spot what you have ignored, you literally cannot unsee it. You finally grasp that your reality isn't just about the events hitting you. It is entirely shaped by where you choose to aim your focus. Repeat that choice daily. It marks the exact line between a life feeling forever hollow and one standing rock solid as you continue to level up. Look, I've had moments where the right call was obvious. Not to the crowd, but quiet and crystal clear in my gut. A deep, stoic recognition that didn't need any outside validation. Yet I still took the easy way out. I picked the soft option. The route demanding zero sweat in the present moment. Every single time I dodged the work, I felt a fracture. Nothing loud, but sharp. Like I took a physical step away from the person I was supposed to be. Initially, I lied to myself, said it didn't matter, just a tiny slip. But zooming out over the months, the ugly pattern became impossible to ignore. Those weak choices weren't random. They were stacking up, paving a very specific road, and that road led straight away from the life I claimed I wanted. The obstacle becomes the way. Aurelius didn't write that as a catchy bumper sticker, but as a rigid law of nature. Hardship isn't the enemy. It is the exact road to strength. I realized I was treating friction as a reason to quit instead of a command to engage. I read resistance as an excuse to procrastinate. I should have seen it as proof I was finally marching in the right direction. That lie cost me dearly. Every time I picked comfort over discipline, I fed a weak version of myself, a version terrified of challenges, dodging duty, and trading long-term pride for cheap, instant comfort. And that weak version never stays quiet. It spreads. It becomes your normal. It turns into your default setting, and once that happens, it wrecks your trajectory in ways that take years to fix. I realized every choice isn't just about the outcome. It is about identity. It is actively deciding who you become in the aftermath. When you hit snooze and stay in the warm bed instead of executing the plan, you aren't just skipping a workout or a task. You are carving a habit into stone. You are proving to yourself that your word is worthless. Those daily betrayals stack up, cementing a belief that becomes your permanent standard. Marcus Aurelius never prayed for an easy life. He expected chaos, brutal challenges, and a deeply unfair world. But he never judged his success by his comfort level. He measured victory by his strict adherence to core principles. That mindset crushes weak, emotion-driven reactions and forces total focus on long-term character. Let's make that same shift together. Stop asking what feels good right now and focus on what builds real character. Let's explore a question together. What builds a better life? Asking that shifted my entire practice, forcing me to look beyond fleeting present desires. It made me realize every comfortable, easy decision demands a heavy toll. We pay that toll later. Lost hours, missed potential, and a widening void between your current self and your ideal self. But the reverse holds up. Every hard choice yields a reward. Rarely instant, rarely visible right away, yet it forges something unbreakable deep inside your mind. It builds absolute discipline. It forges self-reliance. It creates an untouchable inner sovereignty. Honestly, that is what we are all desperately hunting for. Not softness, but command. Not an easy ride, but unshakable trust to face whatever strikes next. That confidence is never granted. You construct it daily. In my practice, I learned perfection is an illusion. You will fail occasionally. You will relapse. You will take the easy route sometimes. That only defines you if you surrender. The goal is never flawless execution. The goal is shifting your trajectory, making decisions that serve the person you are becoming rather than echoing your past. Eventually, that pivot shows, not just in outward success, but in your mindset, how you react, how you stand firm in chaos that once would have crushed you. That is the moment your choices reveal their true power. They are not simply dictating outcomes. They are forging your fundamental character. Character dictates how you steer through reality. Life constantly throws branches at you, some smooth, some jagged, some soft, some brutal. Every single route leads somewhere. Maybe not today, but inevitably. Grasping that philosophical truth completely rewires how you view decisions. They are no longer random events. They form a deliberate pattern, a sequence either dragging you backward or pulling you toward a purposeful existence. Within that clarity, you unlock power, the discipline to pause, analyze the moment, and act with pure intention. Refusing the easy path, demanding what serves your ultimate growth. Personally, I used to complain constantly that I had zero time. Days felt too brief. I was forever chasing a finish line I could not cross. That delusion trapped me until I examined it like a true Stoic. Let us look at this together. I stopped looking at my goals and tracked my actual hours. That is when the ugly truth surfaced. Time was not scarce. I was voluntarily bleeding it out, handing it over without a fight to useless distractions that hijacked my focus. Grabbing my phone on reflex, scrolling an endless digital void, jumping blindly from one hollow screen to the next. Before I even noticed, massive chunks of daylight vanished. Not invested in genuine rest, but burned on cheap distraction. The terrifying part was not just the wasted clock. It was the mindless automation. How utterly normal it felt to bleed hours unchecked. Marcus Aurelius deeply understood that vanished time never returns. He guarded his hours with a fierce reverence that modern society wastes on entirely meaningless physical possessions. Weighing the emperor's philosophy against my own habits was a brutal wake-up call. I hoarded cash, protected my career, yet threw away time like garbage. Time is the basic currency of existence. I started measuring it relentlessly, making the harsh math impossible to ignore anymore. 2 or 3 lost hours daily feels like nothing right now, but that compounds into thousands of wasted hours over a decade. Massive fractions of mortality burned, staring at glass, passively consuming, never building, reacting, never leading. That Stoic observation brought clarity, not pointless guilt. Without cold awareness, transformation is impossible. I never consciously decided to fail. I just let my life be stolen in tiny, silent fractions. That is how defeat happens. Not a sudden crash, but a slow drip until it turns invisible. I interrogated my daily trades. Every action demands a sacrifice. An hour burned on nonsense is an hour stolen from your ultimate life goal. Viewing my schedule through that severe lens, the truth hit hard. I was trading irreplaceable hours meant for building a profound legacy. Trading them for cheap dopamine. Zero growth, zero progress, absolutely zero lasting significance. Mere digital vapor that dissolved instantly. Marcus Aurelius refused to squander his mortality, not from a packed schedule, but from a razor-sharp mind. He recognized his days were strictly numbered. That stark reality governed every action. Embracing that limit is exactly where true philosophical transformation ignites. It is not about living in a cave. It is about pricing the distraction. Once you clearly see the severe cost, tolerance for nonsense drops entirely. I did not smash my phone. That is modern foolishness. Instead, I established iron boundaries around my attention where absolute chaos used to rule. I chose my limits beforehand, deciding exactly what fractions of my day to give, rather than surrendering to the algorithm on command. That single strategic adjustment unlocked a rare sensation: absolute dominance over my own mind and focus. Command brings intense clarity. I quickly discovered my true productive ceiling once the constant pinging and buzzing was brutally cut off. The deep thought and creation possible in pure presence is staggering. But silence also exposed the exact internal discomfort my scrolling was designed to numb. Strip away the static, and you face the mirror. Just you, your restless mind, your ignored duties, and the heavy weight of real work. Facing that mirror takes grit, but it is mandatory. Growth never happens in a fog. It demands unbroken focus. In the quiet seconds, you decide to hold the line instead of fleeing. That is the core tenet here. Mastering intention, not just watching the clock. Existence is not a simple tally of birthdays. It is weighed by your daily discipline. What you study, what you build, what you constantly demand of yourself. So what do you and I do now? Remember, every single morning you are choosing your fate. Make it conscious. You either act on your own principles, or you surrender to comfort. Once you and I see this truth, once we realize our time is ruled by blind habits we never actually chose, we face a hard choice. It is not a grand gesture, but a daily practice. You must reclaim the hours you have mindlessly forfeited. Train yourself to be deliberate, fiercely aware, and fully present in your own existence. After all, the ultimate tragedy in life is not failure. It is not hardship. It is the silent, unexamined drain of your finite time on meaningless distractions. Tolerate this passive state, and it will quietly steal the rest of your life away.